Hi, everyone. For those of you on this session that may know me or may not, my name is Stacy Strickland. I am a customer success manager in the Southeast, covering North Carolina, South Carolina, and the state of Tennessee. So glad to be here today. Aside from just ensuring you can see my screen and see my calendar. So today in my portion, as Asaita mentioned, in this series, we've been going through the total meeting life cycle. So the last two sessions were before and during the meeting. This session is going to be ensuring you can continue your work after the meeting's over. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say in today's world, I find myself in more meetings than I have ever been in before. And so all of these meetings, it's really difficult to keep up with everything, make sure your action items and content and conversations continue on after the meeting. So that is a benefit to using Microsoft Teams with the integration to Office 365 and everything being in one central repository. You can continue to work even after your meeting's over, whether it's a private meeting, maybe it's a meeting you're having with citizens, or maybe it's a meeting that you have every day or once a month or week with your team. So I am going to kind of not assume that everybody joined the other sessions, so I may say a few things you've already heard, and hopefully I show something that you're not aware of. So the first thing, I'm going to break it into two parts. I'm going to talk about the personal type meetings. So whether it's a virtual interview you're conducting for a head count, maybe it's a meeting you're having with vendors, citizens, whatever the case may be, but it's not a meeting that you have with your collective group of people that you work with every day. So in those meetings, you would schedule those from either the team calendar here, like you see, or through Outlook. So if you're in Outlook, you can, of course, schedule the meeting from there, but I'm going to show you just, through Teams. So you've scheduled your meeting, you had your meeting, but then where does that meeting live if it's a personal meeting after it's over? So one thing, you can search at this search bar up here. So if you were looking for something, because if your team's environment is anything like mine, it's very full of rich content, but sometimes might be difficult to find. But you could have, the meeting could have already finished and you want to follow up or create some content or continue having conversations around that meeting. Or maybe you missed the meeting and you want to go in and see what you missed. You can certainly come up here and search. And so when I click that, it takes me directly to the container where all of the content and the conversation went on during my meeting. So this was a daily leadership sync. And like I mentioned, if it was a personal meeting that you scheduled through the Teams calendar or through Outlook, it will live in the chat section here. So just a few things that I want to call out. If you're ever wondering or you need a visual of the difference, whether it's a meeting or a group chat or a private chat, if you'll just look, there's the purple icon with the calendar. Anytime you have that, you can always kind of visually see that was a meeting versus a regular chat. So here I've found my meeting, and you notice it says daily leadership sync. Well, it's between myself and Deborah. Her and I meet periodically every day and just check in on a few things. So I want to pin that. And the reason for that is, as you notice when you chat in Teams, it shows the most recent to the oldest. And then after a certain amount of time, depending on how much you chat, the UI kind of drops off at a certain time. So I don't want to lose this meeting chat because we're always creating content. We're always asking each other questions or having a conversation around the topics of this meeting. So by pinning it, it stays at the top of my chat here so that I can easily and quickly find it if I need to. Now here, as you probably noticed, Teams always is going to give you an audit log, if you will, of who does what. But at the top, it shows the different tabs here. So this chat is the conversation thread around this meeting, but I could say, so I can let Deborah know, hey, I'm not actually going to be here tomorrow. We won't meet, but I'll talk to you on Friday. And then, of course, Deborah, as you notice, she immediately reacts. So I know that she's seen it, so we can continue on with our day. You can certainly create meeting notes. So as the meeting notes, the nice part about this, when I just click directly from the chat, and in true Microsoft form, we're always going to give you multiple ways to do the same thing because we want to meet every user where they're at. So here I can see the meeting notes. I can come in and add additional notes here. But you'll notice, because this is essentially the meeting notes in a Teams meeting is kind of like a wiki. So I would say it's similar to a OneNote Lite. And if you don't have a lot of rich content or a lot of history, this may be perfectly fine. And you can come in, you can edit it, you can remove items, but maybe you want to track things for, you know, a running yearly log, or you want to be able to potentially share these notes with somebody outside of your meeting. So in that case, what I also did up here, you see this plus sign. I'm gonna click this, and what you're all gonna see, this is a government tenant. This is a GCC environment, but I have enabled these third-party apps. So one thing I will say is if you see things that you do not have access to, it is available in the government community cloud, but it's typically, we deploy it off by default. And so if you do not see what I'm showing and you potentially had a use case for Poly, which we'll talk about, or a few other of these third-party apps, or even Microsoft apps, just you should reach out to your IT team, state your business case, and see if they can permit you to have it turned on for your account. So again, they are available. You just may not have them turned on in your environment. But what I did was I chose OneNote here. And when I clicked on that, I created the OneNote, and it made it as a tab at the top of this daily meeting that I have with Deborah. And as I mentioned before, the really nice part about this is you can come over here, and if you've ever used a Google Doc, or if you've ever did any kind of co-authoring inside of Teams, you should be familiar with this, but you don't have to save it. If you make any edits here, it just automatically saves. But you could see I could add multiple sections here. So I can have a lot of rich content. But you can come back and you can see information that you have added at any point. So if we wanted to prepare for, let's say, September, there's not information in here. You know, Deborah and I could work in this at the same time, We've not had to send an email to each other. We haven't had to follow up and say, hey, where did that document go? Where's our meeting minutes? Let's just add some. And let's say you've made all your updates, but like I mentioned, you want to share it with somebody outside of you and Deborah. You can open in the browser. And when I open in the browser, I get the share option. And that is a really nice benefit to using OneNote. In addition to the additional features you get, you can also share it where the meeting notes, unless you copy and paste or snag a screenshot, the traditional meeting notes inside of a Teams meeting are not shareable. You probably have this part turned off from your organization, but if I wanted to share it with someone, I could just come in here, add a Gmail account if I needed to share it with somebody outside of my organization. I could share it with somebody inside of my organization. I could copy the link, or I could just send it with the message, and then I've shared this. It's just that simple to share out your notes. It will be the same concept when you're sharing other files from here as well. But that leads me to the Files tab. So any of the documentation that we're building out or the content we're creating from these meetings, we have access to in this one container here. And as I mentioned, you can access them through files. You can access them here through chat. And if you click on them here or from the Files tab, they'll open up. You can make your edits. So let's do that. If Deborah is on, maybe she can edit this Excel document with me. And if Deborah is able to come in, one thing you'll notice from the co-authoring is when there are multiple people in a file at the same time, wherever that person is in the file. So if I was in this cell, it's going to lock this particular cell until I finish what I'm working on and move on. Kind of the same thing with a PowerPoint, it would lock a particular slide when someone's editing it, so you can't go over people while they're actually working on that particular piece. And then it will also show here. So see, it shows me a visual. Deborah's in. It'll give the color coordinated to the circle and where they are in the file. So it lets me know where Deborah's hopping around to, so I make sure I don't work over her. So then I close this when I'm finished with my part, and then it again saves everything. I don't have to do any downloads or saves or any of that. So let's talk about, maybe there were multiple people on this meeting and I need to have a follow-up to maybe pick the meeting cadence. And I wanted to use Polly for that. So I will say the forms integration into Teams is coming. Hopefully, I think it's on target for the end of this quarter. But Polly is a third-party app that is available. And so if you have that allowed in your organization, you can come in and you can create a question here and you can poll people before, during, or after your meeting. You can make the results visible to everyone. You do have a little bit of options here. And this is the free version of Poly. There are some limitations, I believe, with Poly's free version. You can only have 25 responses per poll. But then, so I sent this, and then when I hop back into the chat, there's my poll. So we can come in, I can say, I want pizza. Then Deborah can respond, and it will show the votes here in real time for everybody that is a part of this meeting. So then Deborah and I are on the same page. So this is the meeting or after meeting experience for, as I mentioned early, a personal meeting that you scheduled. Like I said, it could be a inspector check-in. It could be a virtual interview. There are a lot of reasons why you have meetings outside of with your team. And as I mentioned, they live in the chats. So one thing to call out, it is a little bit different in a personal meeting versus a team meeting. The files all live in the uploader's OneDrive. So if you do not have OneDrive, you wouldn't be able to attach a file here in a meeting. So it is dependent on OneDrive. But again, whoever the uploader is in this, it would live in their OneDrive account. Let me see. Let me pause right here for just a second, Asaita. If you want to let me know if there are any questions around the personal meeting experience.
Sure. Just before I ask a question, and I'm echoing, I don't know why, but I wanted to quickly say, because there's a lot of people asking about recordings for previous sessions. I just wanted to say that we are working on compiling kind of a playlist for all of the sessions clipped by topics that Ricardo is actually helping us do. And we will make sure that link is shared with our participant audience. So just wanted to say that really quickly. There was one question, Stacey, if you can show again the search capability for finding notes from meetings.
Yeah. So what I did in the search bar, and Ricardo could come off of mute and talk a little bit better about this, but I believe is built off of SharePoint's search. So it's a very, very powerful search tool here. But if I typed in daily, because I knew the meeting name was Daily Leadership Sync, if I start to type that in by that keyword, it's going to pull that up. But you can also, for teams in general, you could search for any type of keyword and it will search the entire Teams environment around your messages. So you see up here the messages, the people, the files. I mean, it will search inside of a file. The only difference is, I will say, if you find the file that has this tied to it, like here you go, if the word was inside of the file, it won't actually take you and highlight the word, but it'll at least bring it to the document that you're trying to find.
Yeah.
Or and the person. Yeah, go ahead, Ricardo.
Yeah, I agree. That's, I'm not sure exactly if the SharePoint engine is behind this, but that functionality is the same. And a lot of people kind of miss that this search is pre-indexing all this content. So just like you said, a word on page 52 of some PDF somewhere, that can be a part of your search results. So that's a real key piece to mention. We're way past the days of needing, super great file names to find stuff. We got a real powerful search engine, whether it's here or SharePoint or the Office 365 portal. Search works really well.
Absolutely. Now it has saved me in more times than not, because you remember a conversation, you remember a file, but you're using this tool and this platform every single day for everything. So it tends to pile in a lot of content and information. So the search bar is your friend. And then one thing I would mention while I've got this minimized so you can see it, we forget about this, But up here are back buttons that will take you back to where you were previously in the tool. So certainly make sure you are utilizing that often missed feature. Any other questions, Asaita?
One other question is, are you able to turn off chat after the meeting is over? And I don't know if this is something Matt or Ricardo will be able to cover later.
That's actually a great question, and you can. And there's several different ways to do it. So especially if it's a personal meeting. So a team meeting that we're going to talk about in a minute, a little bit different. You can kind of mute the channel, but you can't turn off chat. So here, let's say this was my meeting. You have several options. So first, say this is and you can do this with group chats or individual chats as well as meeting chats, but say this is a weekly office hours, and there's always a lot of participation from your community. And during the meeting, you have a lot of discussions, but then, you know, the next day they might say, well, Stacy, I have a question about this. So it's always, people are always talking. Well, if you want to mute it, you can. And what happens is you see it grays out to let you know that it's muted, but you still can see conversations. You just don't get the notifications all the time. And you can still continue to chat. So if I need to chat, I can. Deborah can chat back to me. But again, it's going to show in bold that there is conversations being had. It's just not going to give you those banners and always give you that interruption, if you will, if it's a noisy meeting chat. And then, of course, you can unmute it if you need to. Now, what we just recently released, so if I hop over to the calendar, and let's find a meeting I just created. So say this is a recurring meeting or a one-time meeting, doesn't matter. When you click on the meeting options, it takes you in, and we are continuing to evolve and update these. So you will see changes, but what we have recently rolled out is what you see here. Because we have heard from our customers, and they were saying, I have confidential meetings where I don't want any chat at all. I don't want anything that would be discoverable later. So I want to disable chat completely. So if you choose this, again, if it's a one-time meeting, you have to do this every time you schedule the meeting. But if it's a recurring meeting, you can set it and forget it. But if you choose disable, what'll happen is when you're in the meeting where that normal chat bar is, it will be there, but it will be grayed out. So you have no option to send any messages. And then if you choose in meeting only, it'll be where you can freely chat during your meeting, but then after the meeting's over and you are back in the chat section here, you would see the chat, you would still have the history. So if you needed to reference back to it later, you could, but then this will be grayed out after the meeting ends. So those are the new options now that we recently released, I think over the last month. So they are just, don't forget your meeting options, because I think a lot of people, when they schedule meetings, they do forget those options that they have available to them.
That was great, Stacy. You know, I know a lot of people have that, especially if they've been invited to a meeting, but they haven't attended, you know, it's a recurring meeting. The chat seems to be kind of noise. So the fact that you showed how to mute, but also I love the functionality that we have in meeting options to actually disable. I just wanted to have you clarify something when you said, you know, the chat is not going to be discovered. Just want to make that clarification that, you know, admin can always discover anything, that any communication that has taken place in Teams with FOIA requests, you know, e-discovery and so on. So I just wanted to make sure that was
Agreed. I always jokingly tell people, if you don't want it on your local news, treat it like you treat your email. You know, your Teams is powerful, and sometimes, especially in chat, we seem to get less formal, which, you know, it's a chat. It's similar to a text message. You are gonna not be as formal as you would in an email or things, but just keep in mind that if there are FOIA requests like the Saita mentioned, all of this content is discoverable based off of your retention policy. So every state, every agency is different. If you have questions, I would certainly recommend you work with your CSM or your IT team if you don't know what your retention policies are, but natively Teams keeps everything so that you can have access to it later. But some of my customers delete chat history after like 14 days. So just keep in mind the discoverable piece. I just always like to mention that.
Yeah, and where Stacy's mentioning as far as, you know, being able to delete after 14 days or so, that is an administrative task. So as an end user, you will not have that capability. You could delete it from the front end, from the container. So with that, I think, Laura, there was one question. Is Laura still with us?
Yes, if you don't mind. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to break in and give you, Stacy, kind of a combo scenario that just to review a little bit. If you could just repeat how to start a personal meeting, and then talk about how to chat from that meeting, because I think the access to chat once you're in the meeting is a separate question. And then when you create the meeting, I guess there was another question around scheduling assistant, or how can you see if someone's available or not? That was, so maybe whatever order you want to take that in. That's like 3 or 4 questions we had in the Q&A.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So they probably went through it in, I'd say, last meeting, but especially for those that weren't there, I'll happily show you what it looks like to schedule a meeting. But as I mentioned in the first part of this, with the personal meeting, you can schedule those either through Outlook. So if you have the Teams plugin here, you can schedule a meeting. And then, of course, because it's integrated, when you add it to your Outlook calendar, it copies to your Teams calendar and vice versa. So if you're already in Teams, there's really no reason to hop into Outlook to create the calendar invite. You can just do it directly from here. So when you're scheduling a new meeting, you can add your folks here. If you have external people, I do think this is a very good time to say we just recently increased for all of our government and commercial customers. Used to, it was 300 or 350 people that could be in an interactive Teams meeting like this. Now we have increased that to you at no additional cost for 1,000 users. So now you can have 1,000 internal and or external users in your meetings, your personal meetings. So here you notice at first it was acting like it wasn't finding that person. But once you get to the end, because they're not in your back-end systems Active Directory, it'll say, oh, okay, this is an external person, and then give you the invite option. You set whether it's going to be a recurring meeting. You can customize it if you need something outside of these options. You wouldn't do a channel meeting if this is a personal meeting, because you don't want to include everybody that's a member of your team site. If you're in a hybrid work scenario and you have conference rooms and you're going to have some people on site, some people remote, you can add a conference room here if your administrators have configured that. You can add your agenda. And then, of course, the scheduling assistant, like Laura was mentioning, is here. So that rich scheduling assistant that you had natively in Outlook copies over to Teams. So if you prefer this view when you're scheduling for people that are internal to your organization, By all means, don't forget the tabs up top and click on Scheduling Assistant to find what time works best for everyone. I will tell you too, if you're a visual person, you probably noticed Deborah's red, and that's because Deborah has something on her calendar at this time. So it will give you suggestions if you do not prefer the Scheduling Assistant. You can click the suggestions, and then of course she goes back to gray because she's free at this time. And then when you send it, and this is often a question that we get as well, but you have to establish a meeting before you can see the additional content here. So there's your meeting link. Here's the meeting options, meeting notes if you want to go ahead and create them, files to go ahead and upload them before your meeting, which I'm sure they've already went over for you previously. I'll pause right here, Laura. If there was...
I just want to say you were right there on the chat. I think it's important to show that we have the chat there as well as independently in the chat tab for those who are, I think is a third question that was, how can I get to the chat during a meeting? And I think there's two ways. You can either go where you are right now or into your own chat.
So say I join this meeting, right? Where if you're in the new Scheduling Assistant, it gives you a nice pop-out window. So if you're somebody with multiple monitors, you can put this meeting on one monitor and have your Teams client to multitask on the other. While you're in the meeting, to access chat, you access it from the top navigation rail. The chat bubble is pinned and you can access it here. You can see that I sent that message to Deborah. And you can see Deborah's responding to me. And then, so I'm going to go ahead and just end this. That's how you access it while the meeting's open. But as I mentioned earlier, any personal meetings that you're having, all of those meeting chats live in your chat section here of your Teams client. So if it's one that you have often, definitely pin it like we discussed, or you can see all I do is meet in this demo tenant, because as I showed you the purple with the calendar icon, that is a visual to show you that's some of your meeting chats.
That's great, Stacy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So those were the personal meetings or the private meetings. Let's talk about a team meeting. So you have a group of people, either it's a project-based team or a people-based team, but you have a collective group of people that you work with every day on in different areas. Just like chat, the first thing I will say is you notice I can pin channels as well. So if you have a particular, let's say this road expansion project, I'm a part of the daily Scrum meetings for the project planning team. I can come in and I can pin this so that it stays up at the top. It's still going to live here. It's not going to go anywhere, but it gives me the visual so I can quickly find it. One, so if there's a meeting going on, I'll see the little camera icon rolling here to let me say, oh gosh, I was multitasking. I forgot I'm supposed to be in this meeting. And I can hop right into it. For this, I think we were going to talk through this team site though. But so you're all a member of the Office of the Courts team. You have all these different channels. When you schedule a meeting inside of a team channel, by default, whoever the scheduler was, it goes on their calendar because they scheduled the meeting inside of the team. Everybody else has to manually go in there and add it to their Outlook calendar if they want to. And the reason for that is when you're working in a team, whether it's people-based or project-based, you may have 10 channels out of 25 that you hide because I'm not a part of the training group. Well, like I don't work on that work stream or topic area. Technology is not a topic area that I work in. So when I hide those channels to minimize the noise in my Teams client, I wouldn't want all of their daily meetings or their monthly meetings because I don't work on those in those functional areas. So that's why you have to go in there once a meeting has been created in a channel. And I will show you, so when I double click into it, where this is canceled because I'm the one that established the meeting, right here is where it would say add to my Outlook calendar, or add to Outlook, I believe. So if you want it on your Outlook calendar as a visual reminder and to make sure you block off that time for others, then by all means, you can just double click into it like I did, and you can add it to your calendar. Of course, the chat, when I'm opened, it's going to bring me to the chat here. And I can see agendas. I can see past meetings. I can see polls. So the same functionalities that we had in the personal meetings, we can continue in team meetings as well. One key differentiator, as I mentioned, these files live in SharePoint instead of OneDrive. So as a team member, you can come in and create a new document, and it's not going to live in your OneDrive. It's going to live in SharePoint, essentially on the back end. But the beautiful part about Teams is you don't have to open SharePoint. You can do everything inside of this view here. So I could create a folder. I could create new files here. And again, this is my general services channel. This is all of the conversations that we're having. You can see the meetings here. If I click on the replies, I can see when that meeting last started, that particular meeting recording. But the beautiful part about this is that this is a daily stand-up. Your daily recordings live here in this one central place. So you can always, if you missed a meeting or you were out sick, you can reference back here. You can see the chat. It's almost like we call it live. It's like we live tweet during a meeting as well. So definitely you could go in here and see conversations. You can see files here. But if I click on this file, just like I could in the personal meeting, I can go in here and I can collaborate and say, hey, we got to finish up this process update or this new contract. Now that we've met and discussed it as a team, let's finish it. I'm just going to put some things in here. And then you can, what's really nice, if you've ever used Word or any of the other Office tools before, you can certainly comment inside of the document. But when you click conversation, it takes you back to that chat thread. So maybe I was supposed to fill out this table, but I can't remember what it is specifically. So I could say, oh. So I can ask a question without having to mark up the document first. So really love the fact that you can show the conversation thread and have discussions around it while you're working on it. So then I can close it here. And then it takes me back. I'm still in the channel. And what's nice is we call this a threaded chat. It didn't start a new conversation down here. It bulked this conversation and the question that I asked relevant to this area. So it keeps everything really neat and tidy so that you can keep everything organized. I'm not going to go into the task assignments because Matt's going to go over that after me, but just as you could in the personal meetings, if you're doing team meetings inside of a channel, you have additional options that you had in the personal meeting. So you could add list. So if you're creating new content, or maybe you're organizing a company party, if we ever get back to work, or maybe a conference, you could create this list to kind of organize everything, and it would be a tab at the top, so you can just easily find your information there. And of course, we could add Polly if we wanted to poll the users, like you saw. And how you can make these tabs, you can add additional tabs here. Maybe this issue tracker was something that we update every day. And if we had a lot of content here, it might get lost. So what you can do is you can make this a tab. And then it's a tab at the top. So it's easier to find than having to navigate through the files portion. One thing I'll say is in a team site, in a channel, if I was to hit meet, it would go ahead and spin up a meeting so that you could kick off an instant meeting to discuss maybe an important topic immediately with the available team members. Of course, if you didn't want to do an instant meeting, here's how you come in to schedule a team meeting inside of a channel. If you choose this option, I will just show you really quickly. It will bring up the native meeting experience here, so it should be familiar to you. You could add the title. It's automatically going to give the channel here. So honestly, unless you have somebody that's not a member of the team and you want to include them maybe to a one-time meeting, or if you want to ensure everybody on your team sees the meeting and you're just starting to use the channel meetings function and you're afraid they're going to miss it, they're not going to know to add it to their Outlook calendar, you can add like a distribution list here to the folks that are a part of the meeting. And then when you send it, it will go to their email as well as show up inside of Teams. But let's say I missed the meeting. I can go in here, I can click on the meeting, and it will show me the recording and actually play it directly from Teams here. So I can watch it. I didn't have to open Stream, and this is actually Stream that's powering this recordings. I believe after July, we are going to be changing where the recordings live from Stream to OneDrive and SharePoint. So if you're not familiar with that, certainly reach out to your CSM and they will make sure that you have the understanding and guidance and information you need. But here, like I say, you can watch the recording. I could make it a full screen if I wanted to see full screen. Maybe they were showing something specific. If I close this, you'll notice the 3 dots, and that's one thing I would always encourage you to look for. As it pertains to Microsoft, there's always going to be a lot more options if you look for the 3 dots. So you can share this link. Now, when I click share this link, it would automatically basically make it available to everybody in your organization. So if I click on the 3 dots, because maybe I wanted to share it to my boss, or maybe I wanted to share it to a colleague that was out, didn't want to make it available to everybody, you can click Manage Permissions. What it's going to do is it's going to open up Stream on the back end, and it brings you to directly to the permissions page. So if you check the box here to allow everyone in your company to see the video, that's everyone in your tenant. So if you are a central tenant and you have multiple agencies in one environment, if you check this box, that means everybody can potentially see it if they go to the Discover section here. So maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you only want to share with specific people. You can certainly search for people here, pick the person you want, and then share it. Once you make any edits here, certainly make sure you hit apply. And then if those of you that may not be familiar with Stream, I'm going to cancel this, but then here it takes me to that recording. So I call Stream Microsoft's YouTube, but one thing to keep in mind, it is an internal function only. So you can't copy this link and share it with somebody outside of your organization or outside of your tenant. So if you need to do that, if they're inside of your tenant, they can certainly you could share the link and they can access it. But if they're outside of your tenant, you'll need to click the 3 dots here and download the video. And then whatever your organization or agency allows you to, however they allow you to share externally, then that's how you would, maybe it's OneDrive, maybe it's SharePoint, you could put it into that repository and then share it accordingly. Of course, you can update the video details, you can trim it, you can add it to a group or a channel. So if you have a certain group of people that you like to upload videos to and Stream, you can create all that here. Now, I will say if you were in Stream and you were trying to find an old meeting recording, you can either click videos or you could click meetings, but it will take you to the library of all the meetings that you actually initiated the record function to. And then just like before, you can edit, you can download, or you can click into it and go back to the way that it was. And then just to quickly show you before I move on, if I do update video details, that's where it takes me back to that view when it took me away from Teams. So I'm going to minimize this web browser and go back to Teams. I'm going to cancel this. The nice part is, though, anybody that's inside of this team site, you don't technically have to share the recording with them. They can, at any point on demand, go back and watch it. So you would only really want to share it if it was somebody outside of your team that needed to access the video. I'm going to pause for just a minute, Asaita, and see if there's maybe something I need to reference back to, or Laura, either one that are watching the chats.
I'm trying to make sense. I don't know if this is a follow-up to previous question. Any plans to allow all owners to edit meeting held in a channel? I don't know if I don't understand what.
Yeah, I was asking behind the scenes, Ricardo, on that one. My understanding is all owners in a team can edit a meeting in a channel. So I'm not sure if that's a constraint that IT might have placed, or if that's a confusion on who's the owner. Does anybody else on our team have a comment on that?
I could be wrong. I thought it was whoever initiated the record had the owner functionality, but Ricardo.
Well, no, this is not. I'm sorry, not related to recordings, but just editing a meeting.
Oh, sorry.
So you create a meeting in a channel and a team, and can all the owners edit today? Should they be able to edit today?
Yeah, I just did a quick test myself. It doesn't look like it. You still need to be the organizer of that meeting from my quick test.
Okay.
I was an owner in a meeting, but it didn't let me just edit any other meeting.
And okay. I will, yeah, and me being the organizer of this one, that was how I understood it as well. So similar to a personal meeting, if you're the one that establishes it, you kind of have the full control.
The organizer role. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I would assume when we do push out later this year that co-organizer functionality, I would assume it would be personal meetings as well as channel meetings.
Yeah, we'll have to ask about that on the roadmap. That's a good point.
Yes.
But yes, we're all looking forward to that. So thank you for the question. Apparently the current constraint is only the organizer can make changes to the meetings. And then the rest of the questions are really about the training, these sessions, and we're providing some answers in the chat. So
Okay.
I will be publishing more information, but look at the Q&A. Sorry, I said chat, but it's Q&A.
That's okay.
There are some links already posted for this week and next week. So if you want to go ahead and grab that, then you have your invite for next week. But I'm also going to post the registration link, which is a better way for you to stay on our list if you want us to follow up with the YouTube content that will be easier to watch and more groomed, if you will. So appreciate all the good questions.
Awesome. One thing I'd like to call out, it may be obvious, but I don't want to assume, in a channel, which we call these channels, so you have your main top level team, Office of the Courts here, and then these channels are topic areas or work streams where you can get very granular as to what you're discussing, what you're meeting on, and what's relevant inside of that area. So I could go into the business channel here, and what do you first see? You notice different tabs up at the top. It's a different dialogue here. You see different meetings. So always remember, you can have multiple different channel meetings and content and recordings and conversations and files very neatly organized in different separate containers underneath that top level team. So it's just a really nice benefit to keep all your conversations together, all of your recordings, meetings, your files are going to list here in the chat, but they're also going to list in the files tab. So if you'd rather hop in here to find the content, you can, or in the post. And then of course you can come in here and you can create additional tabs to continue your work after your meeting.